The story began in a chicken processing plant in Illinois. Inside one of the chickens, destined to become nuggets, hid a mysterious virus. And worse yet, that batch of nuggets was delivered straight to the local elementary school cafeteria. That noon, an unlucky girl named Shelly happened to eat one of the virus specials. Meanwhile, our main character Clint made his entrance. He was a failed novelist from New York, a man who dreamed of becoming a writer, but even his mom hated his stories. Out of options, he returned to his hometown Fort Chicken and decided to take a substitute teaching job at his old elementary school just to survive. As soon as he arrived at the school gate, the security guard Rick came up trying to buy drugs from him. Clint looked confused, saying, "Dude, I'm a teacher, not a dealer." After finally shaking Rick off, he discovered that his car had been blocked by the PE teacher Wade. To make it worse, someone had written a curse word on his window. Clint looked around and saw a bunch of wild kids running amok, cursing, fighting, screaming. It looked less like a school and more like a mini asylum. He walked into the office and met the vice principal Sims, an old-fashioned guy who firmly believed children should return to the pre-digital age. Sims confiscated Clint's phone, proudly declaring that this was a no-phone campus, where both teachers and students must experience a real childhood. When Sims tried to hand him a school map, Clint waved it off with a smile and said, "I used to go to school here." In the teacher's lounge, Clint met a group of eccentric teachers, each one stranger than the last. The teacher Rebecca wore a panic alarm button that automatically summoned the police if anyone touched her. The PE teacher Wade acted like a total clown, while the sex ed teacher Doug was painfully awkward in social settings. There was also a teacher named Tracy, who clearly hadn't found the courage to come out yet. Clint scanned the room, found no one interesting, and went straight to talk to his longtime crush, Lucy. They exchanged a few warm words, and just as the air started to feel romantic, Wade popped up again. The three of them started talking about Clint's novel, a story about a man who buys a haunted boat. Wade immediately poured cold water on him. "Bro, someone already wrote that story." After Wade left, Lucy walked Clint to his classroom. On the way, Clint complained that Wade was a jerk. Lucy just smiled and said, "He's my boyfriend." Clint froze on the spot, his face screaming pure embarrassment. During class, a boy named Patriot and his buddy Dink started mocking Shelly, whose face had broken out in strange blisters. Clint tried everything to make the class fun, but Patriot refused to cooperate, even pulling out his phone in the middle of class. When Clint scolded him, the brat threatened, "If you touch me, I'll say you tried to grope me." Clint was angry, but he forced himself to hold it in. After all, he realized that Patriot was the same kid who wrote the curse word on his car that morning. Deciding to ignore these little devils, Clint asked the students to help him read his novel draft. That's when the quiet boy Calvin raised his hand, ready to read. But Patriot went right back to bullying Shelly again. He reached out to pull Shelly's pigtails, but when he pulled, he somehow tore off a chunk of her scalp along with it. Shelly snapped instantly, leapt onto Patriot, and bit him right in the face. Clint rushed forward to break up the fight, but ended up getting scratched by Shelly too. Roaring like a wild animal, Shelly bolted out of the classroom. Clint hurriedly dragged the bleeding Patriot to the nurse's office. Meanwhile, the security guard Rick finally got his hands on his stash of magic mushrooms and happily started tripping inside his car. During recess, Clint returned to the teacher's lounge and told Lucy about the terrifying scene that had just happened. Elsewhere, Dink confronted Shelly, asking why she attacked Patriot, but Shelly lunged forward and bit him too. The playground descended into total chaos, while Wade only noticed that Lucy and Clint were laughing together near the basketball court, which made him instantly jealous. Soon after, Rick realized something was horribly wrong. He saw an infected child eating his own parent. Panicking, he called Vice Principal Sims to report it. The problem was, Rick was still high as a kite and couldn't even form a full sentence. Even so, Sims decided to check it out. But the moment he stepped outside, a swarm of infected children jumped on him and tore him apart. At the same time, the infected Patriot grew more and more feral, sneaking into the principal's office. Back in the teacher's lounge, Rebecca, terrified, pressed her panic alarm button. Wade finally realized how bad things were and led everyone into the school building to take shelter, barely managing to lock the rabid kids outside. Meanwhile, Patriot wreaked havoc inside the office, cutting all the phone lines. Minutes later, Sheriff Dave arrived at the school, but when he reached out to calm one of the kids, the child bit his finger clean off. Screaming in pain, Dave jumped into his car and drove off, only to discover an infected kid hiding in the back seat. And seconds later, he too met his end. Realizing the police were useless, Wade decided to take matters into his own hands. But just then, Patriot ambushed them. Clint got tackled by Patriot. Rebecca immediately pulled out her pepper spray and unleashed it right into Patriot's face. Dazed and furious, Patriot turned and attacked another teacher instead. The two struggled violently and ended up trapped inside a closet. The rest of the teachers seized the chance to flee, following Wade deeper into the building. In their panic, they ran into young Calvin. The good news, he wasn't infected yet, so they brought him along. Shelley kept chasing them relentlessly, forcing the group to lock themselves inside a classroom. But outside, Patriot had already opened the main gate, letting a flood of infected students swarm into the school. Now trapped, Calvin said, "They all have cooties." At first, no one believed him, until the sex ed teacher Doug nodded seriously and said, "He's right." Doug began examining the blisters on Shelley, trying to understand how the virus worked. But before long, Shelley escaped again. Wade suggested they make a run for the parking lot, but Clint shook his head, insisting that they should head to the principal's office for help. The group split into two opinions, tension rising. Then Lucy stepped in to mediate. "Stop fighting. We'll wait until 3 p.m. when parents come to pick up their kids, and then we'll signal for help from the roof." Everyone reluctantly agreed, but Lucy noticed the scratch on Clint's arm. Wade immediately locked him inside a room for quarantine. Doug followed him in to examine, and soon discovered that Clint was infected too, but differently from the kids. He had a fever, yet hadn't lost control or shown violent behavior. When the others asked how Doug knew that, he awkwardly raised his hand and said, "Because I tested his body fluids." The room went dead silent for a moment. Time ticked by, until it was finally 3 p.m. The teachers took Calvin and climbed up to the rooftop, hoping to signal for help from the parents below. But the mother down there didn't notice anything wrong. She was too preoccupied with her phone to notice what was happening in her surroundings. Meanwhile, her son Racer climbed into the car and started biting his baby brother, then turned to attack his own mother too. Suddenly, teacher Tracy was grabbed by a child, but when they looked closely, it turned out to be Tamra, and shockingly, Tamra wasn't infected. Then the other kids spotted them. Everyone ran as fast as they could and hid inside the gym, but their bad luck wasn't over yet. The infected Dink caught Doug, and without hesitation, Wade grabbed a fire extinguisher and smashed Dink's head until it burst. Meanwhile, Lucy was comforting two surviving kids, telling them that as long as they hadn't been bitten or scratched, they'd be fine. Then Tamra quietly said, "I was scratched." A long bloody mark on her back left Lucy speechless. She immediately took Tamra to the bathroom to isolate her. Doug entered full science mode, dissecting Dink's corpse to study the virus. Outside, Rick was still high in his car, blissfully unaware that the world had turned into hell. At the same time, Lucy confronted Wade. She demanded to know why he was so hostile toward Clint. Wade finally confessed that he had been planning to propose to Lucy, but the moment he saw her smile at Clint, he completely lost his courage. Doug's autopsy soon revealed the truth. The virus made the kids rot while staying alive. Their bodies still functioned, but they were no longer human. Lucy frowned and asked, "But Clint and Tamra were both scratched. Why haven't they changed?" Doug came up with a shocking theory. The virus only infected prepubescent children. Just then, the lights suddenly went out, and the whole building was plunged into darkness. It turned out that Patriot had cut off the power. Everyone panicked and checked on Calvin, who was fast asleep, because he was diabetic and needed sugar immediately. While they were looking for candy, a horrible scratching sound came from the wall. The doorknob slowly turned, and everyone held their breath. In the dim light, Lucy whispered to Wade, "I can't marry you." The door burst open. Everyone screamed, but it was only the janitor, Mr. Hitachi. Before they could relax, the infected kids broke into the gym and chased Hitachi into the boiler room. Lucy was desperate to find sugar for Calvin, but Hitachi searched every pocket and found none. Then the radio blared with an emergency broadcast. The entire town was under evacuation orders. No rescue was coming. As hope faded, Clint finally stood up. "We can't just sit here and die." He came up with a bold plan: to crawl through the air ducts, grab snacks from the vending machine for Calvin, and then reach the lounge to get Wade's truck keys. Since he was the smallest, he volunteered to go himself. Before leaving, he handed his backpack to Tracy, and Tamra gave him a cootie shot for good luck. Clint crawled into the duct, while the teachers kept in contact through walkie-talkie. But instead of encouraging him, Wade kept arguing with him the whole way. Lucy finally lost her patience, yelled, "Both of you shut up," and climbed into the duct to follow Clint. They finally reached the teacher's lounge. Clint desperately tried to get snacks from the vending machine, but the money kept getting jammed, driving him crazy. Lucy managed to grab Wade's truck keys and tried calling for help, but all the phone lines were dead. Then a zombie kid on a bicycle burst into the room. Clint hid behind the vending machine, but just then, the machine dinged and started working. The noise drew the zombie's attention. It screamed and lunged at him, making such a commotion that Patriot heard it. He immediately charged toward them. Clint didn't crawl back into the duct until he had grabbed a snack. Then he and Lucy began to climb back, but Patriot was right behind them. Clint threw the snack toward the group's hiding spot and crawled down another route to divert the kids. They locked themselves inside another room, sealing the vent behind them and temporarily trapping the zombie children in the ducts. But that also sent the horde crawling toward the others. Clint quickly warned everyone through the radio. The teachers barricaded the doors, only to realize they were trapped too. Tracy began to scream hysterically. Meanwhile, Clint and Lucy were alone together. In the dim light, they finally opened up to each other. Clint admitted that the real reason he returned to Illinois was just to see Lucy again. He also confessed that he wasn't a novelist at all, just a first-grade teacher in New York. The mood turned soft and romantic. They finally kissed, then awkwardly pulled apart. That's when Clint suddenly had an idea, a possible cure for the virus. Elsewhere, the other teachers talked about their dreams, like a final therapy session before the world ended. Soon after, Lucy radioed the others. Wade answered. He finally apologized, admitting he was jealous of Clint, the New York writer, while he was just a PE teacher. Clint responded sincerely, admitting his failures and wishing Wade and Lucy the best. Then he revealed his new plan, to poison the infected kids by feeding them medicine-laced candy. The operation began. Wade took the lead, assembling makeshift weapons. The teachers finally gathered their courage to fight back, but Clint didn't realize that their radio signal had been picked up by Rick's truck radio, and by Patriot's too. At last, everyone regrouped in the hallway, ready to rush for Wade's truck. At first, things went smoothly, but soon the zombie kids came flooding in like a wave. Wade grabbed a baseball launcher, firing nonstop while covering their escape. As they reached the exit, janitor Hitachi stayed behind, sacrificing himself to hold off the horde. The others made it to the truck, but Wade stayed to protect them. He tossed the keys to Clint. Lucy screamed and refused to leave, but Clint pulled her into the truck by force. Through tears, they watched as Wade was devoured by the swarm. The truck roared to life, and they escaped the nightmare. But the danger wasn't over yet. Patriot had secretly climbed onto the roof. When the gas was nearly gone, Patriot suddenly reached through the window to grab Clint. Clint slammed the brakes, then floored it in reverse, crushing Patriot against a tree with a loud crack. The threat was finally over. They drove into the nearby town of Danville, only to find it completely deserted. The tank was empty. They had no choice but to continue on foot. In a nearby electronics store, they saw the news reporting the rapid spread of the pandemic across the country and how investigators traced its possible source, the infamous Fort Chicken Nugget Factory. Realizing the nuggets might be contaminated, Doug got excited and said, "If we can get one of those nuggets, I might be able to make a vaccine." But before he could even finish, they saw a horde of zombie children sprinting toward them. Panicking, the group dashed into the nearest building, which turned out to be a children's playground. Inside, traces of a recent party were still visible, and infected chicken nuggets were scattered all over the floor. Doug didn't hesitate. He grabbed one immediately, but the moment he did, the zombie kids surrounded the playground. Trapped and hopeless, they felt it was all over. Until Wade heroically showed up, charging in with the janitor, Mr. Hitachi. Wade shouted while spraying wildly, "Get in the van! I'll hold them off!" The group ran out of the playground, managing to lock the crazy kids inside. They finally reached the van, and the driver turned out to be Rick, still tripping on mushrooms and grinning. "Whoa! Am I dreaming right now?" Clint noticed Wade's spray gun and warned him, "Water won't stop them." But Wade smirked. "It's not water, it's gasoline." Once everyone got out safely, he lit a match, and boom, the entire playground went up in flames.